Welcome to the Vancouver Police Department's 2024 Commendation Ceremony. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Tanya Byzantine, and this is Steve Addison, and we will be your MCs for this award ceremony. We are here today to honor sworn officers and civilian professionals from the Vancouver Police Department who accomplished extraordinary things during the past year, often in the face of extreme adversity and danger. We are also going to recognize several community members, volunteers, and ordinary citizens who have gone above and beyond to help this community stay safe. Theirs are stories of bravery, service, and sacrifice, and we couldn't be prouder to spend the next couple of hours telling them to you.
Before we continue, let's take a moment to acknowledge that today's ceremony is taking place on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we're grateful to be here and grateful to share this land with the many generations that came before us. Now, if you're able to, please rise. Turn your attention to the back of the room as dignitaries and special guests are escorted to their seats by Sergeant Major Ray Gardner, Piper Tim Fanning, and members of the Vancouver Police Department's ceremonial unit. Staff Sergeant. Please be seated. Thank you, Chief Palmer, Deputy Chief Steve Rye, Deputy Chief Howard Chow, and other members of the Vancouver Police Department's executive and senior leadership team. Mayor Ken Sim, representing the City of Vancouver and Chair of the Vancouver Police Board. Vancouver Police Board member Patricia Barnes, Sergeant Ralph Kaisers, representing the Vancouver Police Union, and Andrea Wright, representing who is the Executive Director of the Vancouver Police Foundation. Chief Palmer will now make some remarks.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today with you all. I would like to recognize Mayor Ken Sim. Thank you so much for being here, and we really appreciate the support that you provide to our members of the Vancouver Police Department and the common sense that you provide to public safety in our city. It means a lot to the community and all of our members. I'd like to recognize from the Vancouver Police Board, Mr. Alan Black, Ms. Patricia Barnes. Thank you so much for being here. The Vancouver Police Foundation members that are here, our President of the Vancouver Police Union, Ralph Kaisers, and all the members of my executive including Deputy Chief Steve Rye and Deputy Chief Howard Chow. Thank you for being here. A special welcome to all the community members, our VPD members, and the family members, and to all of our honored guests and recipients who are receiving recognition today for exceptional acts of bravery and community service to this city and your remarkable dedication to making Vancouver a better place. Just before I continue my comments, I just want to take a moment of silence to recognize one of our sisters in blue, who we lost over the past week, and we will never forget her service and sacrifice. Thank you. It's nice to be back on track with everybody here at the Roundhouse. I know we did have a few gaps here with COVID-19 in the past few years where the world was kind of disrupted and a lot of changes in society, but it's great to be back to this annual celebration and have all of you here today. Policing is a very challenging profession, and we're very fortunate in this city that for the past 138 years, since May of 1886, the hardworking, dedicated men and women of the Vancouver Police Department have given so much of their lives, either leading on the front lines or working behind the scenes, supporting the front lines to ensure public safety in the city and keeping people safe, risking their own personal safety, assisting total strangers in their time of need, often on the worst day of somebody's life when there's nobody else there to help. They have the helping hand of a police officer who arrives to assist them. And they also show care and compassion for people who are less fortunate in our society. And they dedicate themselves to selfless service, serving our community without thought of recognition or gain. But today we are going to recognize them, and we're going to recognize frontline police officers, our civilian professionals, and members of the community who have done an exceptional job in Vancouver. While people are home sleeping at night, our officers and civilian professionals are working around the clock 24/7 because we don't work a 40-hour work week like most occupations and most businesses. We work a 168-hour work week, and our doors never close. And we're not in one location, we're in every location all throughout the city. It's a nonstop business, it's dynamic, it's dangerous. There's lots of stuff happening in the city, but our members do an outstanding job keeping Vancouver safe. And I think it's easy to forget in a free society like Canada and a safe city like Vancouver, all the work that goes on behind the scenes to make it that way. After more than 35 years being a member of the Vancouver Police Department and the last 9 years as the Chief Constable, I couldn't be prouder of the members of the VPD, our sworn officers and our civilian professionals, and the work they do to keep this city safe. Today you're going to hear inspiring stories, amazing stories about the work they've done, not only from members of the police department, but incredible people from community that stepped up. It's not their job, they're not paid to do this, but in time of trouble and danger, they saw something going on and they did jump in and they assisted, and they didn't just pull out a phone and start filming. They actually got into the fray in many different cases and helped out people, and in some cases saving lives. Also at today's award ceremony, we're going to be hearing about the Police Officer of the Year Award, where we annually celebrate the achievements of an exceptional police officer that's made a career of going beyond the call and contributing to public safety in the city. These are always highly skilled police officers and leaders in our organization. And a newer award that we have only been doing for the past 6 or 7 years, which is our Civilian Professional of the Year, where we recognize the outstanding dedication and service by our civilian members who work so hard behind the scenes and quite often don't receive the same public profile or recognition as our police officers, but do an incredible job every day when they come to work, and we're very proud of their service. We're also going to be recognizing community safety leaders for their outstanding service in Vancouver and their contribution to making Vancouver a great place to live, work, and visit. I want to give a huge thank you to everybody that's here today. A special thank you to the family members, to the parents, to the spouses, to the children, to the friends and family, the people that provide all the support to our members year-round throughout their lives. Sometimes it's a very rewarding profession, but sometimes it can seem thankless at times. But we know that we always have the strong support of family, and all of our members need that family support to be successful. And we all owe you a collective debt of gratitude for everything you do supporting our police officers and our civilian members. In closing, I would just like to thank the Commendation Board, the Chair, Superintendent Andrew Chan, the Vancouver Police Union, and the Vancouver Police Board for your roles in selecting this year's winners. Special thank you to Steve Addison and Tanya Vizentine, who will be our MCs today. And I also want to thank some people that work behind the scenes that sometimes don't get recognition for all the great work they do, including Mackenzie Goforth, Aaron Murray, Susanna Lim, and Laurel Kennedy. And thank you to our Sergeant Major, Ray Gardner. Enjoy the day, everybody.
Thank you, Chief. We'll now call up Mayor Ken Sim to say a few words.
All right, I don't keep secrets. I literally went to the chief and I said, it always sucks following you. So, good morning, everyone. And I do want to start by acknowledging that we're hosting today's ceremonies on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I do want to thank them for their generosity and their hospitality and the love and care they show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. I also I'm not going to acknowledge everyone that you acknowledged. I'll just go yes as well. But I do want to give a special shout out to my teammates on the Vancouver Police Board who are here today. So Patricia Barnes and Alan Black, they're here. I don't know if Frank's here. I think he might have been coming. And I also want to thank the councillors, my teammates on council. Unfortunately, they had a pre-existing commitment. So Brian Montague, Councillor Montague, he snuck out. He knew where the real show was today. He's ex-VPD, by the way, so he loves you. Actually, they all love you, but don't read that the wrong way. What else? Where are we here? Okay, I do also want to thank the organizers of the event, this event, and the VPD Commendation Committee who nominated all the award recipients. Look, I've been part of committees that put on events, and I've been part of a process where you sift through applications, resumes, and you highlight people, and it is an incredibly heavy lift. So thank you for doing it. It's super important, and it's incredibly appreciated. And finally, before I get into the speech here, like Adam or sort of the chief mentioned, really want to thank the families. The job's a tough job, and it's emotional, it's stressful, worrying about your loved ones who are putting themselves in harm's way. In a perfect world, we wouldn't bring stuff home, but we don't live in a perfect world. So, the stuff that our members bring home, I'm sure it's incredibly tough on relationships. So thank you. It does mean a lot, and our members wouldn't be able to do what they do if it wasn't for your support. And so thank you very much. And one other thing I do want to mention as well before I do get started is, I do want to acknowledge with an incredibly heavy heart the sudden passing of one of our members. So on behalf of everyone at the Vancouver Police Board, the City of Vancouver, our teammates on council, I just want to say our hearts are with you, and we know it's a tough time right now, and we're thinking of you. So on that, as you know, we've made public safety a priority at the City of Vancouver, and while the City Council, we can help set a direction and support the VPD in making that a reality. Make no mistake about it. It's the VPD that actually is bringing public safety to the City of Vancouver. You do all the hard work, you make all the sacrifices, the self-sacrifices, you show leadership, and you put yourselves in harm's way every single day to keep us safe. And make no mistake about it, we do get to live the lives that we do because of you. And I've had the personal honor, and by the way, a lot of our council members have as well, as we've had the honor and the privilege to see the VPD in action. A lot of us have been on ride-alongs. I've personally went on a car 8788 ride-along as well, where I was able to witness our officers and our mental health workers actually help someone who was experiencing a mental health crisis and got that person the help that they needed. I've personally seen a lot of situational and de-escalation training at the TTC. I was stupid enough to attempt the POPAT. Yeah, no, it was, by the way, I know there's some film out there, don't watch it. Like literally, I failed miserably. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that, because not me failing at that, the fact that our officers get put through that, the training's absolutely amazing. And what they need to do, under pressure, under stress, with their hearts beating, the decisions that they have to make, and sort of leads into the next thing. I think of what happened. We all saw what happened at Lord Byng High School a few months back, where there's an individual carrying guns in the school. Yeah, absolutely crazy. I just think of our officers who were racing to the scene, hearts pumping, going into a hot situation where they don't know what the outcome's going to be. They don't know what the intention of the person's going to be, and there are a lot of kids and civilians there. And it has to be celebrated that no one got hurt. And that goes to the fact that, the VPD is just an amazing organization that does so much preparation and training, and the leadership that our leaders have shown, growing our future generation of people. It's just off the charts awesome. And I can confidently say, look, my background, I've toured over 2,000 different organizations on this planet over the last 3 decades, and the VPD is a top 5 organization. Not top 5%, top 5 on the planet. And we should be proud of that. And so today, we get to give a shout out and an extra high five to individuals that have gone beyond the call of duty, our uniformed officers, our civilian members, and residents or citizens in the community that have gone beyond the call of duty to do what's right for our city. So I've read some of the stories, and they're absolutely amazing. And I just want to say congratulations to everyone who's being recognized today, and stay awesome. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We're ready to get started with the award presentations. When your name is called, please walk up to the right side of the stage, and you'll be greeted by Chief Palmer and Mayor Sim to be awarded your accommodation and have your picture taken. You'll then exit to the left of the stage. If you're part of a group of recipients, please wait until everyone's name has been called before getting up out of your seat and approaching the stage. For members of the media, we ask that you refrain from approaching the recipients in the hall while the accommodation ceremony is taking place. We'll be happy to facilitate interviews after. If you're here as a family member or the friend of an award recipient, please feel free to come up and take pictures and videos.
Okay, first up is the recipients of this year's Jim and Vicky Chu Community Safety Leader Award, which recognizes outstanding contributions of community members who improve public safety and demonstrate exemplary leadership and passion for making Vancouver a safer place for everyone. This award is typically bestowed on just one individual, but this year we're doing things a little bit differently. And that's because for the better part of the last 3 decades, Craig Jacks and David Wask have been, for all intents and purposes, joined at the hip. Late through the night and into the early morning hours, while most of us are at home asleep, these 2 community crime watch volunteers are out working hard to keep our streets safe from drunk and dangerous drivers. Road safety is their passion, and you'll often find these 2 gentlemen out working alongside VPD officers at counterattack roadblocks, where they do things like helping us to spot drunk drivers who are switching seats, people who are pulling U-turns to get away, and people sometimes who are even throwing bottles of booze or even drugs out their windows. When they're not at a roadblock, chances are they're out operating a speed reader board in one of your neighborhoods to remind drivers to slow down, or they're working with our traffic enforcement officers to spot And they're working as professional observers with our traffic enforcement officers to spot people who are playing on their cell phones in traffic. It really is a labor of love for their communities, and we're all so much better for having them on our side. For David, it began in 1988 when he joined what was then known as Citizens Crime Watch. Craig joined 7 years later, and that began what has grown into a deep friendship and a dynamic partnership. Since joining Citizens Crime Watch 36 years ago, David has logged 956 volunteer shifts, mostly on Friday and Saturday nights. And since 1995, Craig has completed more than 1,650 volunteer shifts, logged 9,936 volunteer hours. To put that into perspective, that's like working a full-time job for 5 years straight without taking a vacation. Their charitable work doesn't stop there, because when they're not out looking for speeders and drunk drivers and people playing on their phones in traffic, they're collecting and delivering toys and diapers and clothing, furniture, and other donated items to give to struggling families that need a helping hand. And all that's just scratching the surface of what they do. So for their decades of dedication to crime prevention and public safety in our city, the Vancouver Police Department is proud to award Mr. Craig Jacks and Mr. David Wask the 2024 Jim and Vicky Chu Community Safety Award. We're now going to move on to the Vancouver Police Board Award of Merits. These awards are presented by the Vancouver Police Board to citizens who, on their own initiative and in the face of actual or anticipated danger, made an attempt at saving a life or assisted police in preventing crime or apprehending an offender. It was just after 9 o'clock at night on November 14th, 2020, when Mary, we're not using her last name, was settling in for the night in her East Vancouver home when she heard what sounded like screams coming from outside. She opened the door to investigate, and she stepped out into her backyard. As she wandered towards the lane where she had heard the screams, she came to a man who was covered in blood. Moments earlier, the 34-year-old victim had been lured into the lane behind Mary's house and stabbed multiple times by an associate with whom he'd had a falling out. The wounds would eventually be fatal, but when Mary first encountered him, the victim was still alive, and he'd managed to drag himself into a neighbor's yard. After she saw the injured man for the first time, Mary then saw the suspect. He emerged from the same neighboring yard, wiping a bloody knife on his jeans and walking away. It was a fight or flight moment for everybody involved. And Mary, who at the time was in her mid-60s, had no intention of running away. In fact, she did the opposite. Grabbing the keys to her car, which was parked in the lane, she started her vehicle, followed the suspect toward the end of the lane, and used the front end of her car to pin the man against one of those large wooden telephone poles in the lane. This slowed him down temporarily, and though he eventually managed to get free, it gave Mary the opportunity to call 911 and start providing key information to the VPD officers who were responding. And as the suspect started to run, Mary followed in her car. She provided a description of his clothing and his movements until the VPD officers arrived and took him into custody. Mary had helped us catch a killer, but her work wasn't done there. It was raining, by this time. So Mary returned home. She grabbed an umbrella and had a family member hold the umbrella over the front end of her car to preserve the forensic evidence on the bumper that had transferred there when she temporarily pinned the suspect against her vehicle. Mary's actions were pivotal in helping us quickly arrest the suspect, who was charged with second-degree murder and is now off the streets. For her quick thinking and decisive actions that led to the arrest of a dangerous suspect, Mary is awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit. Mary was unable to join us today, but we will make sure that she is hand-delivered her recognition.
What would you do to save the life of someone you've never met? Would you risk your own life, even if it meant diving into the cold waters of English Bay in the middle of the night? And what would you do if you already knew there was little chance that the person you were aiming to pull from the water was even going to survive? Maya Kootley and Mason Ramez didn't have time to consider those questions on the morning of October 3rd, 2021. The two were visiting Vancouver from Kamloops that morning and were out for a walk along the seawall when they heard the commotion at Sunset Beach around 4 a.m. As they moved closer, they realized the commotion was coming from a group of friends standing on the beach and calling for help. Moments earlier, after a night out that was wrapping up with some socializing on the beach, a 25-year-old woman stood up, walked away from her friends, and disappeared into the water. Her friends waited for her to resurface, and when she didn't, panic set in. While one person called 911 for help, Maya and Mason sprung into action to help someone they never even met. Wading out into the water, they managed to find the victim, who was floating face down and unconscious. Together, they pulled her out of the water and up onto the beach, where Maya performed CPR until VPD officers arrived and took over life-saving efforts. The victim received emergency medical treatment and was taken to hospital, where she sadly passed away several days later. On a cold and dark October morning, Maya Kootley and Mason Ramez placed themselves at considerable personal risk to rescue a stranger who was drowning. For their courageous and selfless actions, Maya and Mason are awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit.
We messed that one up. Oh yeah, you want to hold it? There you go.
It was September 10th, 2019, and Rebecca Chapman was working as a support worker in a home in Vancouver's West End for people with serious mental health challenges. The day had started like most others, and Rebecca was working on the main floor of the house around 8 p.m. when she heard a noise, followed by somebody yelling from upstairs. And within seconds, that normal day had turned into complete chaos. First, a resident ran into the kitchen, and then fled out of the house. Seconds later, another man stumbled downstairs into the kitchen and collapsed onto the floor. Rebecca could see right away that the man was gravely injured and bleeding to death from a wound in the side of his neck. The victim had been stabbed, and as he lay dying on the kitchen floor, Rebecca had no idea who had stabbed him or where the assailant was. For all she knew, the assailant was still inside the house. And as long as she stayed in that house, her life was in danger too. A lot of people would probably have fled for their lives if faced with a similar situation, and that thought probably crossed Rebecca's mind as well. But instead of running away, Rebecca put her own safety on the line in an effort to save this man's life. With VPD officers rushing to the scene, Rebecca began performing first aid on the victim, who was still alive but was rapidly losing consciousness. In fact, when the first officers arrived, they found Rebecca performing chest compressions on the victim, who sadly did later succumb to his injuries and died in hospital. It was only later that Rebecca learned that the suspect had fled the house immediately after the stabbing. He was arrested later that night by VPD officers after returning to the crime scene. For her courageous actions in trying to save a life without concern for her own safety, Rebecca Chapman is awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit.
On a midsummer evening in July of 2022, feeling helpless, hopeless, desperate, and alone, a woman posted a goodbye note on Facebook and tried to end her own life. She also posted, then quickly deleted, a photo of herself. But before she hit delete, the picture was seen by a number of people who recognized where she was and what she was about to do. Suicide is a complicated issue, and for many of us, it's a difficult one to talk about. But it is important that we do talk about it. Not just for the thousands of people who struggle to overcome thoughts of self-harm, but for all of the people we have lost, family members, friends, and colleagues to suicide. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, 4,000 Canadians die by suicide each year. But because of the actions of Richard Wasnock, there is one name that's not on that list. Richard was one of the people who saw the initial Facebook post picture of his friend in July of 2022, and he understood the urgency of the situation. He jumped in his car and raced to his friend's house. There were others who had seen the picture too, along with first responders, and they were all rushing to the scene. But Richard got there first, and when he arrived, he could see from the ground that his friend was in medical distress on an elevated balcony. Recognizing that there was no time to spare, Richard climbed up onto the roof of a parked car and pulled himself up over the balcony onto the railing to his friend. The woman was unconscious and blue in the face. With police, firefighters, paramedics still minutes away, Richard provided life-saving first aid to his friend. When first responders arrived, they took over first aid and rushed the woman to hospital for treatment. Richard's actions were heroic and life-saving. Without a doubt, his friend is alive today because of his quick thinking and his decisive actions. For coming to the aid of a friend in desperate need, using whatever means necessary to help save her life, Richard Wasnock is awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit.
Like the previous story, this next Award of Merit goes out to a couple of brave citizens who came to the rescue of someone who is in a dark place. It happened the night of October 23rd, 2022, just after 2 a.m. Soichiro Oku and Donald Pinchot were walking across the Cambie Bridge. They saw a stranger stripped fully naked and begin to climb over the railing that separated the pedestrian walkway from the fall down to False Creek. It was a cold night, and the water below was even colder. And though neither Soichiro nor Donald knew for certain what the man's intentions were, they realized that in this weather, a fall or a jump from the bridge to the water below would almost certainly result in death or serious injury. Working together, the two men grabbed hold of the naked man who was heavily intoxicated and suicidal. They pulled him back over the guardrail. As a passing cyclist flagged over two police officers outside VPD headquarters near the south end of the bridge, Soichiro and Donald pinned the man against the cement barrier that separates the pedestrian walkway from traffic. The stranger, however, was intent on jumping, and after a difficult struggle, he managed to break free and make another attempt for the railing. VPD officers pulled up just in time. They managed to grab hold of the man and take him into custody before he went over the side. The man was taken to hospital for medical care and for help. For putting their safety at great risk to save the life of a man they had never met, Soichiro Oku and Donald Pinchot are awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit.
Our final award of merit recognizes two strangers who came across the aid of a fellow citizen in serious medical distress. It was around dawn on May 11th, 2023, and Gary Connell was walking his dogs near the seawall close to Granville Island. Richard McDonald was working a construction job nearby. It was barely 6:30 a.m. Richard and Gary were alerted by a group of fishermen to someone who had fallen into the water and appeared to be drowning. Moments earlier, while walking alone and doing some maintenance on his boat, a man had apparently slipped from a ladder, struck his head on the boat, and fallen into the water. He was now stunned, bleeding, and motionless, lying face down in False Creek. Without hesitation and not yet knowing what had transpired, Gary jumped into False Creek to rescue the stranger. Richard jumped in too, and together they pulled the man out of water onto dry land, where Gary performed CPR until the man came to, disoriented but alive. Police and paramedics soon arrived and found Gary and Richard caring for the stranger whose life they had just saved. The man was treated by first responders, then taken to hospital for additional care, and he has since recovered. For their swift response in saving the life of a stranger, Gary Connell and Richard McDonald are awarded the Vancouver Police Board's highest award for civilian bravery, the Award of Merit. Now moving on to the Award of Valor. The Chief Constable's Award of Valor is awarded to officers who demonstrate the most conspicuous act of bravery in extremely hazardous circumstances, to those who demonstrate a daring or preeminent act of valor, self-sacrifice, or exceptional devotion to duty in the presence of grave danger, and to those who purposely take action for the benefit of others while knowing that in doing so, they place themselves at substantial risk of death or serious injury. Constables Blake Cherzanoff and Scott McDonald were working the morning shift together in East Vancouver on July 5th, 2021, when the warble came across the car radios, indicating that a in-progress call of the highest magnitude was about to take place. As police officers, we're all conditioned to react the same way when we hear that warble. We sit up, we stop talking, and we get ready to drop whatever it is we're doing to help someone in imminent danger. In his 14th year of service at the time, Constable Cherzenov had responded to hundreds of high-priority calls, and as the details of this particular incident were broadcast into his earpiece, that experience told him that this was one of those extremely serious calls. A 2-year-old boy had just been abducted from his grandparents, and he was now being forcibly confined in a neighbor's apartment on the 8th floor of a building in Strathcona. Though the exact circumstances were still unclear, as Constables Cherzenov and McDonald rushed to respond, they understood the gravity of the situation that was unfolding, as did others working that day. And as they pulled up to the front of the apartment building, the constables were met by 2 other officers who also responded to the call. They entered the building and converged on the locked door of the suspect's suite, where they could hear the man screaming inside, as well as the frightened cries of the little boy who had just been snatched from his grandparents. Fearing the boy was at imminent risk of harm, the officers knew they had to break down that door to rescue the child. They took turns kicking at it until it opened. Constable Cherzenov was the first officer into the apartment after the door was breached, and he was immediately confronted by the suspect, who was holding a knife in each hand. Now facing the deadly threat, Constable Cherzenov still had presence of mind to warn the other officers as they followed him into the apartment. But there wasn't enough time or distance, and the suspect lunged at Constable Cherzenov, stabbing him in the shoulder and chest. Despite his very serious injuries, Constable Cherzenov persevered through the pain and rescued the child. With the help from the other officers on scene, Constable McDonald took the armed man to the ground, injuring his hand in the process. Despite the injury, he worked through the pain to disarm and arrest the suspect. The suspect was charged with kidnapping, forcible confinement, and attempted murder of Constable Cherzenov and the assault of Constable McDonald. He was later found not criminally responsible as a result of a mental health disorder. For extreme heroism in the protection of a child from an armed suspect who was intent on causing them serious harm or death, Constable Blake Cherzenov and Scott McDonald are awarded the Vancouver Police Department's highest award for bravery, the Award of Valor.
Nothing in this profession is predictable or routine. Some calls, like the one we just told you about, are of the highest risk right from the start. Others are more of a slow burn, where you don't really know what you've got until it hits the fan and you're in the thick of it. Things started out pretty innocuous on the evening of April 27th, 2022. Some of our officers were called to an apartment building near Commercial Drive to assist paramedics who were dealing with a difficult patient. It's the kind of call that happens several times a day. This man had reportedly suffered a seizure and was acting erratically. Things like biting people, running around, trying to leave through a window. But when Constables Thomas Gisler and Daniel Anzulovich first arrived, the man was sitting inside the apartment with his hand inside a reusable shopping bag. He was agitated and refusing to answer basic questions. The constables were soon joined by Acting Sergeant Greg Parks. The officers tried repeatedly to reason with the man and tried to de-escalate the situation, But the man would not de-escalate, and he was still refusing to take his hand out of that reusable shopping bag. Suddenly, with his hand still in the bag, the man stood up, walked away from the officers, and fired a Glock 10-millimeter pistol through the bag. Constable Anzulovich, Constable Gisler, and Acting Sergeant Parks called for cover, backed away, and tried to contain the suspect to prevent him from escaping. They were soon joined by Constables Adam Homan and Kelsey Woods. As additional officers raced to help, these 5 put themselves at great risk by guarding the front door of the man's apartment so that he could not escape. At one point, they exchanged direct gunfire with the gunman after he came out of the apartment and started shooting. Over the course of the next 2.5 hours, VPD officers repeatedly received and returned gunfire with the armed suspect, who at times would come to the front door of the building and fire shots at the officers and into the heavily populated residential neighborhood. Our officers used themselves as human shields, placing themselves in potential line of fire to protect innocent civilians who were evacuating. Others put themselves in direct line of sight of the shooter as they attempted to stop him. Finally, after dozens of rounds were exchanged, the suspect was stopped after he opened a sliding patio door and pointed his gun toward our officers. 2 police officers were left with no choice but to fire their guns and kill the shooter. There were approximately 40 VPD officers who responded that night, and every single one of them played an important role. The actions of a few stand out. In addition to the 5 that I've already told you about, I'm going to highlight the courageous actions of several others who did extraordinary work after the shooting started. Sergeant Jordan Crondall, who attempted to locate the shooter and took charge of evacuation efforts. Constable Steve Herrick, who was by his side during those evacuation efforts and was injured during the shootout when a shattered piece of fence struck him in the face, split his lip, and broke several teeth. Constable Matt Nielsen, who faced gunfire and helped pull Constable Herrick to safety after he was injured. Constable Jason Barham, who faced gunfire, shielded fellow officers, and returned fire. And Constable Chris Bowater, a medic who assisted in containing the gunman, then provided medical assistance after the suspect was shot. A significant amount of ammunition and firearms were later discovered inside the suite after the shootout. And without the actions of these brave officers, it's quite likely there would have been multiple deaths, both to police and to civilians. For exposing themselves to grave danger in order to preserve civilian life and the lives of other officers, the following are awarded the Vancouver Police Department's highest award for bravery, the Award of Valor. Sergeant Jordan Crondall, Acting Sergeant Greg Parks, Constables Daniel Anzulovich, Jason Barham, Chris Bowater, Thomas Gisler, Steve Herrick, Adam Homan, Matthew Nielsen, and Kelsey Woods.
Now we're moving on to the Chief Constable Commendations, which are awarded to police officers who show outstanding skill, judgment, dedication, or integrity over the course of a single investigation, operation, or incident, who demonstrate the highest standards of police conduct or humanitarianism in a single incident, operation, or investigation where there was a risk of danger, who demonstrate exceptional skill, judgment, dedication, or integrity in the performance of their duties, or who develop a method or program that has substantial effect on the operation of the Vancouver Police Department. A few minutes ago, we presented the Award of Valor to Constables Blake Chersonoff and Scott McDonald, who were seriously injured during the rescue of a 2-year-old boy who had just been taken hostage in an apartment building in East Vancouver. This next award recognizes 2 other officers who responded that day and acted with courage and distinction. Constables Jesse Lee and Riley Rabaza were working that day as patrol partners, and they were among the first officers on scene. The constables were positioned outside the apartment when the decision was made to break the door down to rescue the child, and Constable Lee took turns kicking at the door until the other officers assisted it in being opened. With Constables Chersonoff and McDonald stabbed and injured, Jesse and Riley joined the fight to control the violent suspect. But the man was not giving up. He was still armed, and the officers were starting to tire. That's when Constable Rabaza saw a small window of opportunity to win the fight. She stood up, she unholstered the taser strapped to her leg and stunned the suspect with a jolt of electricity, giving her partners the opportunity they needed to disarm the suspect and put him in handcuffs. For their tenacity in stopping a man intent on harming their fellow officers and for rescuing a child from potential danger, Constables Riley Rabaza and Jesse Lee are awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation.
And Riley sends her regrets. She's a dedicated officer, and she worked the night shift last night, so she wasn't able to make it. The Portland Hotel on West Hastings Street is home to some of our city's hardest to house people, many of whom live in poverty and struggle with both addiction and mental health challenges. The VPD officers who work in the downtown east side know this building and its residents well, and we have a lot of compassion for the challenges many of them face in life. The morning of February 11th, 2022, Constables Ellen Fallis and Allison Loader were joined by Sergeant Desmond Roberts as they checked on the well-being of a tenant on the 6th floor. The woman was overdue for her medication, and there were concerns that she might be suicidal. So the officers accompanied a mental health nurse to her room to check on her well-being. As they were finishing up, the fire alarm began ringing throughout the building. This in itself is nothing unusual at the Portland. Tenants often sneak smokes in the stairwells, and they set off the smoke detectors. And to most on the 6th floor, the fact that a fire alarm was going off was nothing to be concerned about. They continued to do whatever it was they were doing before the alarm started ringing. But 3 floors down, it was a different scene. And as the officers walked down the stairwell to exit the building, they arrived in complete chaos. The 3rd floor was completely clouded in smoke. Dogs were barking, the fire alarm was ringing, tenants had come out of their rooms into the hallway. Many were yelling, others were confused, and almost everyone was starting to panic. The chaos and the confusion was made worse by that fire alarm that was continuing to ring and the thickening smoke, which made it difficult for everyone to breathe, communicate, and orient themselves. The officers radioed for assistance, but they knew that the fire department was likely several minutes away. And understanding that there was no time to waste, the officers began working methodically across the floor to evacuate residents and find the source of the fire. As Sergeant Roberts searched for and found a fire extinguisher, Constables Fallis and Loader crawled on their hands and knees to avoid the smoke. and methodically worked room to room. They breached 10 doors to notify and evacuate residents, including a man in a wheelchair and a dog. Sergeant Roberts eventually pinpointed the source of the smoke, and he breached the door to find a piece of furniture that was on fire. He emptied his fire extinguishers to knock down the fire, and then he set out to find another fire extinguisher to finish the job. Though there were no civilian injuries as a result of the fire, the 3 officers were taken to hospital for treatment of smoke and carbon monoxide inhalation. For their bravery in taking quick and decisive action to protect vulnerable citizens from harm, at great risk to their own safety, Sergeant Desmond Roberts, Constable Ellen Fallis, and Constable Allison Loader are awarded the Chief Constable Commendation.
What images come to mind when you think about someone involved in the gang conflict? For many of us, it's a young man, often in his 20s or 30s, a fancy car, often with bullet holes, guns, and tattoos. But there's another side of this ongoing gang conflict that doesn't always come to mind right away. And that's the increasing number of young women drawn to the gang lifestyle, sometimes by a boyfriend and often by the allure of a lifestyle that is never as glamorous as it seems and rarely lives up to its billing. Sergeant Sandy Avalar and Detective Constable Anisha Mayette became partners in the midst of the ongoing gang conflict. And as members of the VPD's gang crime unit, they'd often come into contact with gang guys' girlfriends and other young women who had been drawn to the dangerous lifestyle. Having seen firsthand the far-reaching and devastating impacts of gang life, the officers wanted and needed to do something to help these young women correct course. But when they looked around, they found there were almost no dedicated services to support women and girls in gangs. As problem solvers, Anisha and Sandy took it upon themselves to fill the void. The result was Her Time, a program dedicated to preventing young women and girls from entering gang life and provide an exit strategy for those looking to get out. Through research, the officers began to educate parents and community members in Vancouver, and they worked with other law enforcement agencies to spread their message to other communities. With support from the Vancouver Police Foundation and the Washington Kids Foundation, Her Time now provides in-school and extracurricular programs to help girls develop skills in relationship building, technology, health, and fitness. They also work in collaboration with Safer Schools Together, Odd Squad, and Crime Stoppers. Sergeant Avalar and Detective Constable Mayette have presented locally, nationally, and internationally. As their impacts have grown, they've begun to include women in their presentations who they've helped leave gang life. These officers are widely respected in the community and amongst their peers. In 2019, Sergeant Avalar and Detective Constable Mayette were recognized with a Community Service Award by the International Association of Women Police. In December of 2023, Sandy and Anisha traveled to Vienna, Austria, and presented to the Organization of Security and Cooperation of Europe. And just last week, they presented at the UN in New York City. For identifying a need and developing a program with a continued and long-lasting effect for young women in the community, Sergeant Sandy Avalar and Detective Constable Anisha Mayette are awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation.
If you spent any amount of time at all in Vancouver's West End over the last few years, you've likely come across the friendly face of Constable Jason Doucette. As a neighborhood policing officer, the West End was Jason's beat. He epitomizes the mantra that no call is too small, and he gained the respect of the entire community for being someone who always took the time to stop and talk about public safety concerns, and for being someone willing to work with the community to find pragmatic solutions to the problems they face. So when the erratic behavior of one particular community member, an unhoused woman with extremely complex mental health and substance use issues, began causing people to fear for their safety, the community turned to Jason to find a compassionate solution. This woman was no stranger to police. In 2021 alone, we received more than 650 calls about her behavior in 1 year alone. Things like causing disturbances during the day and at night, blocking accesses to buildings, banging her head and body against the windows and doors of storefronts, vandalizing washrooms at restaurants, and openly using illicit drugs. It was unsustainable, it was inhumane, and Constable Doucette set out to find a compassionate solution. For 18 months, Jason worked to address the root causes of the issue, forging relationships with the woman's mental health team that allowed them to visit her on the street and to provide medical treatment. He met daily with residents and businesses, and he listened to their concerns, assuring them that those concerns were being addressed. He also built a relationship of trust with the woman, often checking on her multiple times a day. The persistence paid off when the woman was offered and accepted a new home in a modern mental health facility that has staff and supports to meet her complex needs. And even after she was moved off the streets and into this new facility, Constable Doucette continued to work with the mental health team to ensure she received long-term care and didn't get cycled back out onto the street. The woman is now a client of the Assertive Community Treatment Team, which is an intensive support system for people with serious mental illnesses and substance use disorders. And though she still has challenges, she's doing a lot better. For his compassion and persistence in solving a complex issue, improving the quality of life for a vulnerable citizen and an entire community, Constable Jason Doucette is awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation. Jason was unable to join us today. We'll make sure he receives his recognition. In the early hours of September 9th, 2021, a man walked into the Yukon shelter at 5th and Cambie, started throwing things around, and threatened to burn the place down. He then pulled out a container of lighter fluid, he doused a number of employees, and he threatened to light them on fire. And while some people ran for the door, others fought their way to the back office and locked themselves inside, where they called 911. Sergeant Corey Beck and Constable Bryden Haddon were both nearing the end of their night shift when the 911 call came in over their police radios. They were working separately that night, but they arrived around the same time. It's a bit of a cliche about police officers running into the danger while others are running out of it, but that's exactly what happened in this case here. Because as Sergeant Beck arrived out front of the Yukon shelter, people were rushing out of the building and screaming that someone had gone crazy. And as the officers entered the building, the man who was causing everyone to run sprayed the wall with lighter fluid and set it on fire. Sergeant Beck could hear the people calling from a locked room behind the front desk, and as the suspect moved towards that locked door, he and Constable Haddon challenged him. They ordered him to get on the ground immediately. He defied them, and with the fire now growing, he walked towards the officers. He had the accelerant in one hand and matches in the other. Corey and Brian went hands-on and grabbed hold of the suspect, but he fought back. He hit them, he kicked them, and he grabbed at their guns. As Sergeant Beck and Constable Haddon struggled to gain the upper hand, backup officers arrived, and helped wrestle control of the suspect to get him into handcuffs. None of the shelter staff or clients suffered injury, and the fire was extinguished before any significant damage was done. For their courageous actions in preventing serious injury or death to the shelter staff and residents, Sergeant Corey Beck and Constable Brian Haddon are awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation.
Task Force Tourniquet was formed in March 2017 when an increase in gang violence through the Lower Mainland became a deadly public safety threat. The task force grew into a large-scale, multi-jurisdictional initiative that was led by the VPD. The task force went on to work on Project Tariff, which centered on a group of violent drug traffickers operating in Richmond and on the South Slope of Vancouver. Among other crimes, this group was responsible for extorting a drug user for his vehicle and more than $30,000. The crime group was armed and dangerous, and on one occasion, after police were called to a residence to investigate a firearms call, members of this group fired shots in the air as police were surrounding them. This group was a risk to the public and to police, and to prevent someone from being seriously hurt or killed, it needed to be taken apart. Detective Constable Carla Young devised a sophisticated undercover operation to target and dismantle the group. Working with Sergeant Brian Baruzzi, an experienced undercover operator, they managed to successfully infiltrate the group and gather key evidence needed to make arrests and secure criminal charges. At the height of the investigation, Constable Young ran a complex and high-risk undercover operation to purchase a quantity of fentanyl and 2 semi-automatic assault rifles from the targets. Pulling it off required precise timing and coordination. Sergeant Baruzzi was able to secure the deal for the fentanyl and gather enough evidence for investigators to recover the guns. For demonstrating outstanding skill, judgment, and courage, resulting in convictions for firearm and drug-related offenses for all 5 members of the criminal gang, Sergeant Brian Baruzzi and Detective Constable Carla Young are awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation. Carla and Brian aren't able to attend, but we'll make sure they get their awards. We told you earlier about the dramatic shootout near Commercial Drive and East 5th Avenue on April 2022, when VPD officers risked their own safety to stop a heavily armed gunman who opened fire on them in a densely populated residential neighborhood. More than 40 officers responded that night, and the 2 we're about to tell you about deserve special recognition for the things that they did. Sergeant Keith Howson-Jones heard the call for cover and arrived after the initial shots were fired. He grabbed his long gun and took up a position in close containment to the active shooter. Working with ERT, Keith made his way to the 2nd floor of the adjacent building, smashed out a window to get an angle for a shot, and exposed himself to possible gunfire. Constable Jesse Schellenberg was working as part of the K-9 unit that day. Along with Keith, he responded when fellow officers started taking fire. Armed with his carbine rifle, Constable Schellenberg made his way into a construction site directly across from the shooter's building, exposing himself to potential gunfire in the process. At one point, Constable Schellenberg was able to return fire on the suspect, pushing him back into the apartment building and potentially preventing other officers from being hit or injured. For their extreme bravery while under the threat of gunfire, Sergeant Keith Howson-Jones and Constable Jesse Schellenberg are awarded the Chief Constable's Commendation.
Okay, now on to Chief Constable citations, which are awarded to 2 or more sworn officers or civilian professionals who, working together on an incident or project in which they show outstanding skill, judgment, dedication, or integrity over the course of a single investigation, operation, or incident, demonstrate the highest standards of police conduct or humanitarianism in a single incident, operation, or investigation where there was a risk of danger, exemplify exceptional skill, judgment, dedication, or integrity in the performance of their duties, or develop a method or program that has had a substantial effect on the operation of the Vancouver Police Department. As part of Task Force Tourniquet, a multi-jurisdictional initiative to tackle gang violence, Project Temper focused on a violent group operating on the South Slope area of Vancouver under a known gang associate. In October 2017, investigators received a tip that the group was planning to commit murder, so they set in motion a series of covert investigative techniques. This led to identifying the suspects and arresting them less than a block away from the location of their intended victim. Further information was received the following day that the gang was planning a second murder. The 2 suspects were arrested as they tried to flee from the location where they had planned to commit that murder, and a firearm was recovered. All 4 men were later convicted of murder conspiracy. For making multiple life-saving decisions in a volatile and difficult investigation, the following members of Project Temper are awarded the Chief Constable's citation: Sergeants Mike Bell, Scott Fisher, Rob Jayberg, and Sonny Tierra. Detective Constable Kevin Boyle, Detective Constable Bob Sander, and Detective Constable Jennifer White.
Project Territory began in 2017, targeting 2 crime groups responsible for some of the most violent events in the Lower Mainland. For 5 years, investigators worked on the project, including officers and civilians from all the police agencies in the region, conducting operations across the country and into the US. The investigation called for high-level and covert police techniques. Lower Mainland investigators also worked with Ottawa Police when 2 hitmen were called to Vancouver to carry out a retaliatory murder. Results included the prevention of at least 3 murders and the high-risk arrests of 17 high-level organized crime figures, all of whom were convicted for firearm, drug, and murder conspiracy offenses. In total, 146 firearms were seized, along with 61 prohibited devices, 2 live grenades, 50 kilograms of drugs, $2 million in cash, and a live pressure cooker bomb, and forfeiture of 50% of farm believed to have been used as a staging area to commit the murders. For their life-saving efforts in dismantling organized crime groups, contributing to a 42% province-wide reduction in gang-related murders, the following members of Project Territory are awarded the Chief Constable citation: Superintendent Lisa Byrne, Sergeants Kyle Davies, Jay Edwards, Scott Hyde, and Tim Russell, Detective Constables Derek Hill, Anne-Marie Unheim, Jennifer White, and Lisa Wu, Constable Matthew Nielsen, Special Constable Mark Lingham, Analyst Claire Belchan, RCMP Corporal London Ton, Port Moody Sergeant Fraser Renard, and Delta Police Constable Jason McDonald.
When the call for help went out on the night of April 27th, 2022 from officers taking fire from the gunman at Commercial and 5th, the VPD firearms training team happened to be doing some nighttime training in East Vancouver. The officers jumped into action, grabbing our heavily armored rescue vehicle and driving it to the scene of the shootout, and then tactically positioning the vehicle in the line of fire. Their actions proved integral for the 40 other VPD officers who responded that night, as the ARV provided important cover for the officers who were engaging the shooter and working to stop him from killing someone. The ARV absorbed several rounds from the shooter's gun, which could have easily injured officers or struck one of the many homes in the line of fire. And in doing so, it helped buy our officers the time they needed to slow and ultimately to stop someone who was intent on killing police officers that night. For quickly responding to help stop a dangerous threat, protecting citizens and their fellow officers from potential harm or death, the following members are awarded the Chief Constable Citation: Sergeant Wade Rodrigue, Constables Clifton Louie, Ryan Miller, Chris Mui, and Nicholas Wong.
When Sandeep Duray was executed on January 17, 2012, while at the Vancouver Wall Centre, it marked a major escalation in the ongoing war against two rival gangs. The conflict wasn't new, but the very public assassination of Dure signaled a new and extreme public safety risk, one that was dangerously close to catching innocent bystanders in the crossfire. Investigators believe Dure's murder at the Wall Center was retaliation for the 2011 shootings that killed Jonathan Bacon and Larry Amaro in Kelowna. Soon after the Kelowna shootings, Amaro would begin plotting to kill Dure as revenge. More than 100 VPD officers would join Project Reality, the investigation aimed at fighting the people responsible for Dure's death at the Wall Center. With help from police agencies right across the country, investigators proved that Amaro worked with two other men, Dean Witchar and Robbie Al-Khalil, to commit Dure's murder. The investigation would also tie Witchar and Al-Khalil to an unsolved murder in Toronto. The trial began in 2021, and both Al-Khalil and Amaro were convicted of murder conspiracy and murder. Witchar is still awaiting trial for their role in one of the lengthiest and most complex investigations in VPD history, and for disrupting organized crime nationwide. The following members of Project Reality are awarded the Chief Constable's Citation: Superintendent Allison Lauren, Acting Inspector Sally Davies, Acting Sergeant Glynis Griffiths, Sergeants J.P. St. Amant and Hans Dykman, Detective Constables Jennifer Antonell, Dean Green, Stephen Harris, Lawrence Louie, Anthony Reichen, and Lisa Wu, Constable Jennifer Geese, Special Constable Heather Wilson, and Analysts Peggy Irwin and Chris Stoddard.
This will be our last Chief Constable citation. A chilling 911 call came in just before 3 a.m. on May 22nd, 2021, from a mother reporting that her son had just murdered his friend inside the family home. After the murder, her son, who has mental health issues, chased his parents around their home until they barricaded themselves in a bedroom. Vancouver police officers raced to the home, and when they arrived, they could see into the kitchen from the backyard. The suspect was standing over the victim, holding a butcher knife covered in blood. Weapons drawn, the officers approached the back door of the kitchen and called out to the man to drop the knife. He complied, and the officers quickly took him into custody. They then administered first aid to the victim, but unfortunately, they were not able to save his life, and he died at the scene. After searching the residence to make sure there were no other suspects or victims, the officer rescued the terrified parents from their bedroom. For courageously confronting a man armed with a knife and stopping, the officers are awarded the Chief Constable's Citation. Constables Prab Dhaliwal, Shanann D'Souza, Sean Ferguson, Dallas Taylor, and Malcolm Upton. Okay, now we're moving on to Police Officer and Civilian of the Year awards. For more than 35 years, the Vancouver Police Department's Police Officer of the Year award has been given to someone who, throughout their career, has exemplified the department's core values of integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, and excellence, while also demonstrating excellence at work, outstanding service to the community, and demonstrated leadership. In 2016, we established a separate award recognizing the outstanding contributions from VPD's civilian professional employees who also represent the best of us. This year, we are honoring two outstanding women who have left indelible marks on nearly everyone they've met throughout their entire careers. First up, our 2024 Civilian Professional of the Year. For more than 30 years, Leah Marley has been dedicated to public service in Vancouver. Since 1992, she has worked in a variety of sections, including planning and research, as an executive assistant to the Deputy Chief of Operations and to the Office of the Chief Constable. As a victim services crisis intervention worker, Leah's compassion and kindness were instrumental in supporting families and loved ones during the grieving and court processes. In 2008, Leah became the VPD Block Watch Coordinator. She has worked tirelessly to maintain and continuously improve the Block Watch program, which today serves 400 Vancouver neighborhoods with 8,000 captains, co-captains, and participants. Leah ensures that Block Watch volunteers are given all of the necessary tools they need to fulfill their roles. She's written and produced crime prevention and how-to videos and sends weekly emails and newsletters with tips about ongoing crime trends, success stories, and crime prevention tips. She created a webpage for Block Watch captains and co-captains, which is full of resources and useful information. Leah has organized successful conferences and events, but her real passion lies in training the Block Watch volunteers. During COVID-19, she stepped up to keep the program going by creating online training and presentations in response to community concerns. And those are now used province-wide throughout the Block Watch Society of BC. Leah has a strong drive to market the Block Watch program, always searching for ways to educate the public and recruit new volunteers. In 2022, she received the Chief Constable R.J. Canuel Award for Community Crime Prevention and was only the second civilian to earn that honor. For creating positive partnerships between the VPD and thousands of community volunteers, and her dedication to increasing public safety in Vancouver and beyond, Ms. Leah Marley is the 2024 Civilian Professional of the Year.
Sergeant Jana McGuinness began her policing career as a patrol officer in the Downtown East Side in Vancouver in September 1998, where she built a strong foundation in police work. While in the traffic section, she became a member of the motorcycle drill team, the third woman in VPD history to ride with this team. In 2005, when Vancouver saw an alarming rise in pedestrian fatalities involving seniors, Jana created the Be Safe, Be Seen safety campaign. She visited more than 40 care homes and senior lodges, giving presentations on pedestrian safety. Fatalities began to decrease, and her hard work earned her an education award from the BC Association of Chiefs of Police. As a media spokesperson for the department, Jana's strong strategic and communication skills, coupled with her respectful, warm, and caring nature, helped maintain public trust during challenging events. Her dedication and commitment to her work were evident during the Stanley Cup riot in 2011, when she managed to do a national radio interview while suffering the effects of tear gas exposure. After 2 years in professional standards, Jana joined the Domestic Violence and Criminal Harassment Unit, where she led a team investigating hundreds of difficult cases. These included a successful conviction after a mother was shot in front of her toddler, and the safe recovery of a child who was kidnapped by a parent and taken to another country. Her career came full circle when Jana returned to patrol in the downtown east side in 2020. As a leader, she brought exceptional commitment to providing the best possible public service. She guided her officers through challenging times, taking a genuine interest in their lives and well-being and helping them achieve career goals. She has never failed to show appreciation for the work being done. Sergeant Jana McGuinness's relentless compassion and caring for people who need it most is admirable. Long after she retires, the impact of her contribution will live on in the officers who have benefited and who will follow in her footsteps. For her dedication to ensuring that people feel valued and cared for, and embodying an exemplary level of service that others greatly respect, Sergeant Jana McGuinness is the Vancouver Police Department's 2024 Police Officer of the Year.
Okay, normally this would end mark the end of our commendation ceremony, but because we didn't have an opportunity to gather here together last year, we're going to take a few extra moments to honor the recipients of our 2023 Police Officer of the Year, Civilian of the Year, and Jim and Vicky Chu Award recipient. All of these people were previously recognized at smaller, more intimate ceremonies within the last year, but it's important that we give them the recognition that they deserve, so we're going to tell you about them now. First, the 2023 recipient of the Jim and Vicky Chu Award. Jerry Adams is one of British Columbia's most prominent and influential leaders. He is a member of the Eagle Clan from the Niska Nation and has dedicated more than 40 years of his life to create a culture of truth and reconciliation in Vancouver and in the greater community. At the end of a professional career in the social service field spanning 4 decades, he worked as the Aboriginal Justice Coordinator for the Anglican Diocese of New Westminster, fostering reconciliation and understanding between the church and the Indigenous community. Jerry is a highly engaged Indigenous community leader and has a passion for developing services for youth. He served as the executive director of the Urban Native Youth Association and was a recipient of the Spirit of Crazy Horse Award from Reclaiming Youth International, which advocates on youth issues throughout the world. As executive director of the Circle of Eagles Lodge Society, Jerry worked to reintegrate Indigenous men and women coming out of federal prison into the community. Jerry served on the Vancouver Police Board and on the boards of many Aboriginal and community organizations. His legacy has made Vancouver a more inclusive, his legacy has made Vancouver more inclusive and a safer place for its diverse communities. For working tirelessly with the police and the Indigenous community to build relationships and networks to foster healing, reconciliation, and community, the Vancouver Police Department is proud to award Mr. Jerry Adams the 2023 Jim and Vicky Chu Community Safety Leader Award. Mr. Adams was planning to join us today, but he was unable to be here and sends his regrets.
Jen Mounts began her career with the VPD in September 2007. She worked in the Transcription and CPIC Support Unit, the Quality Control Unit, and then moved to the Prime Management Unit. In her newest role, Jen has done an exceptional job to oversee 3 complex systems, one of which involved the purging and retention of police records. She was instrumental in the creation and success of the program and brought the department in line with best practices. As the administrator for a digital evidence management system that advances how VPD officers gather, manage, and disclose evidence, Jen trained civilian professional staff and played a significant role in the successful rollout. She is also the administrator for a legal application process that provides information regarding criminal charges and dispositions and ensures users are well trained. While she has a BA from SFU and a diploma in adult education from UBC, much of Jen's learning has been self-taught. Her subject matter expertise is highly sought after. Jen volunteers her time with charitable initiatives like Gene Up for BC Children's Hospital, Pink Shirt Day, the Shoebox Project for Women on the Downtown East Side, the Backpack Drive for Covenant House Vancouver, the Variety Club Children's Charity Telethon, and the Special Olympics. For exemplifying excellence at work and for her significant contributions to changing the way the VPD manages data and information, Jen Mounts is the Vancouver Police Department's 2023 Civilian Professional of the Year.
Detective Constable Carrie-Ann Horgan joined the VPD in 2011. Her career has taken her from patrol to the property crime unit and from the organized crime section to her current assignment investigating sex crimes in the investigations division. Along the way, she has earned the respect and admiration of her colleagues with her consistent quality of work, her willingness to assist, and her humble demeanor. As a seasoned sex crimes investigator, Detective Constable Horgan has developed an extensive investigative skill set. Her work is difficult. It involves complex investigations, including abductions and the sexual assault of children, seniors, and other vulnerable people. Her unmatched work ethic and her dedication to solving cases, arresting offenders, and caring for the needs of victims is exemplary. Carrie-Ann is an active member of the Forensic Interview Team and a lead instructor on the VPD File Coordinator course. As a member of the Critical Incident Stress Management Team and Peer Support Unit, Detective Constable Horgan routinely supports co-workers who have experienced traumatic and critical incidents. She offers confidential peer support to members struggling with both professional and personal issues. As a member of the Women's Personal Safety Team, she volunteers her time to help women feel safe and empowered. When COVID-19 brought a halt to in-person workshops, she and other instructors brought the workshops to Zoom, where 1,500 people took part in training. For serving as a mentor and an inspiration, and for her selfless and inclusive approach to everything she does, Detective Constable Carrie Ann Horgan is the Vancouver Police Department's 2023 Police Officer of the Year.
That concludes our program for today. Congratulations to all the award recipients, and thank you everyone for coming. You're all welcome to stay and enjoy some refreshments after the ceremony. Please stand if you're able as Chief Palmer, Mayor Sim, and special guests are escorted out of the fall. Staff Sergeant.
Don't leave your stuff here.